What's up, guys? This is manic.mercurian with a celebrity birth chart reading, historical figure, birth chart reading, whatever you want to call it. Today we're talking about the chart of Donald Trump. This is very timely because, well, actually I'm a little late. It was his birthday yesterday, and plus I've been neglecting the channel. I really have, so I do apologize for that. So let's make up for some lost time. Let's dive into this chart. I'm sure this won't be controversial at all, right? So I'm just going to do my best. I'm going to do my best not to overthink it, and I'm going to approach this just like I would any other chart. So this chart is for Friday, June 14th, 1946 at 10:54 a.m. in Queens, New York. So this means that he has Sun in Gemini, Moon in Sagittarius, Leo rising, but that Leo rising is at the very... Check this out. I can't really zoom in, I'm sorry, but it is at the last minute of the last degree of Leo. It is as close to Virgo as it can possibly get without being in Virgo. So that is pretty interesting. Many of you will know that the middle and last degrees of each sign are called critical degrees. They are of major significance. And the ascendant is probably the most significant part of any chart. So just the fact that the ascendant is at the very, very last part of Leo is very interesting. It does mean that, he does have Leo rising. The sun is the chart ruler since sun rules Leo. But just by a hair, he is so close to being Virgo rising. Even if that birth time was off by a couple minutes, he'd be Virgo rising. What can we talk about? So the first thing I noticed is that there's a lot of activity. Almost all of his placements are in the fourth quadrant of his chart. Okay, I'm gonna do my best to limit the jargon I'm throwing at you. I'll do my best to interpret what jargon I do throw at you. But these last houses, it's the top left corner, the top left quadrant of the chart. Almost all of his placements are in the 10th, 11th, and 12th houses. This is honestly not a surprise. This is clearly a public figure. When you have so many placements in the 11th house, but especially 10th house as well, or placements around the ascendant, that's really what I look for with celebrities. And it almost doesn't matter what kind of celebrity. Most celebrities are going to have major placements, often stelliums, clustered around the ascendant, but especially the midheaven, and then also not just around the midheaven, but in the 11th house as well. There is a gap there with the 12th house. Not in his chart, but in what I'm saying. The 12th house, you can see celebrities with placements in the 12th house, but it's a little bit trickier with 12th house placements because those take time to grow. They can be very strong, but remember, 12th house is the joy of Saturn. There's actually a Saturn connection to 12th house. So for example, since we're talking about it, let's just talk about his Mars really quick. I know Pluto's in the 12th house as well. I don't talk about the outer planets as much in the first part of my birth chart readings. By the way, if you want a reading just like this one, it really helps support the channel. It allows me to do content like this. I'll link my website up above, and I always put my information in the description as well. But please support the channel if you can. And plus, the readings are... You can't get a reading of this value, the value that I offer. Not trying to brag, but I mean, for under $100, I believe they're like around $50 right now. You really can't get this quality anywhere else for that price. Anyway, but what I was saying about the 12th house, it is very interesting that Mars had just risen above the ascendant, above the eastern horizon when he was born. And I know this is kind of a weird tangent to start the chart reading off of. It's kind of just a random thing I noticed. But I do think that's of particular importance. For one, because Mars in Leo, I believe, is a very strong placement. It's not technically in domicile or exaltation, but Mars thrives in the fire signs, generally speaking, or any fiery sign, even Scorpio, which is not a fire sign. It's kind of fiery. So Leo's fixed fire. So someone who has Mars in Leo, they're going to have stamina. This person can fight for, whatever they believe in or whatever their interests are. They have the energy, they have the stamina to fight for that. And if they believe, it's very instinctual. If they believe that they have to fight for this every day, that's what they'll do. It's a reflex. It's very instinctual, this placement. So I do admire that. I'm just talking generally, okay? I'm really talking about his chart. I'm not talking about what I know of this person, from the news or whatever. I'm just talking about the placements. So I hope you can understand that. In that sense, I almost don't think that what I'm saying is controversial. I'm just saying that Mars and Leo, it's admirable, even if you disagree with someone's opinions or, whatever their beliefs are. I'm just saying that this is admirable in the sense that whatever this person's interests are, they're going to fight for that every day. They're not going to stop. They have that stamina. But the significance here with Mars in the 12th house, this means that this may have been something, on the one hand, it's very instinctual. It was always there. On the other hand, though, it may have taken him time to know how to go about fighting for what he wanted to fight for, fighting for his interests, fighting for his pride, his ego. It may have taken time for that to develop. He may have actually not been so much of a fighter at a young age. He may have been someone who, how do I put this? Like, that stamina, that fire was always there, but it may have been suppressed at a young age. So he may have grown up in an environment where, how do I put this? Like, it was stifling. Like, you had to be peaceful. There was no time. There was no opportunity for fighting or even for standing up for yourself, even for defending yourself. He always wanted to do that, but it was suppressed. Okay. I'm just kind of colorizing like what 12th house placements, that's how they work basically. Whatever it is, it's stifled, it's suppressed at a young age, it's pushed into the subconscious. Eventually those placements, or I should say what's represented by those placements, it does emerge again once we get into our late teens, our 20s. So that is, I don't know much about his history, if I'm being totally honest, but I would imagine with Mars in 12th house Leo, you could probably see gradually something stirring within him in his late teens and then going into his 20s where he learned how to fight. Okay, he learned how to embrace that stamina, that warrior energy. And again, this is fixed fire. It's that warrior that's going to fight every day, every day, every day. So that is again, in my opinion, it's a very powerful placement, but it may have been something that was initially suppressed and then really came out later in his adulthood. Okay, but let's talk more on a general level. I don't usually do such a deep dive into such a particular placement so early in the readings. Yes, so I was talking about 10th, 11th, 12th houses. This is the final quadrant. It's the fourth quadrant of any chart. But this is where so much activity is taking place. There are some outliers. Of course, there's the moon as well as Lilith in 4th house Sagittarius, which we'll talk about. There's also Neptune and Jupiter in 2nd house Libra. But other than that, basically everything is in 10th, 11th, 12th houses. It's in the fourth quadrant. This is the quadrant that has to do with the world. Okay, so that's why it's not surprising that this person is very active in the world. This is, they're all about the public life, that's really no surprise at all. His comfort zone would be in the limelight, in public, at work, in his career, on TV, etc. Like that's just 10th house has to do with your career, your public image. 11th house is honestly very similar in my personal opinion, but it's more social in nature. It has to do with your tribes, your groups, your public connections, your community, things like that. And then again, 12th house is more spiritual. It's a little bit different. It's more internal. But again, the similarity between all three of these houses is that they have to do with the world and, how you interact with the greater community, the greater society, things like that. So it's no surprise that that's where his general focus is. Another main theme or pattern that I have noticed with his chart is that you can tell by looking at his chart that he was born during a full moon lunar eclipse. To me, I feel, what I'm thinking? Pretty much any celebrity chart that I've pulled up so far, I can see there's something different about them. I can see there's something special there. And it's not even, I looked up the charts of Doja Cat and Kim Kardashian. It's not even necessarily that I'm fans of theirs, or it's just that when you pull up the chart, you can see there's something different, there's something special, there's something going on. For a person born on a full moon lunar eclipse, does that guarantee that you're going to be a celebrity or a president? Of course not. But it does show that there's something very special going on. Full moon lunar eclipses are, of course, they're a big deal astrologically. That I think that should be pretty obvious. The reason why, the way that I can tell that he was born during a full moon lunar eclipse is because, first of all, you can tell that there's a full moon here because moon is almost exactly opposite the sun. Sun is at 22 degrees Gemini, moon is at 21 degrees Sagittarius. So they are pretty much exactly opposite within a degree. That just shows it's actually within half of a degree to being exact. So he was born pretty much exactly during a full moon. Not only that, but the sun is conjunct the north node. And south node is not depicted in these charts, but south node is always exactly opposite the north node. So that's how you know that moon is conjunct the south node, sun is conjunct the north node. Whenever you have a new moon or a full moon conjunct one or both of the nodes, that's what an eclipse is. Okay, so that's how I can tell he was born during a full moon lunar eclipse. So what does that mean? What does that mean for a person who was born under those circumstances? Basically, it means that there's something very powerful there. It's also very challenging, though. It's one of these things where, yes, this person has kind of like superpowers, you could say, but those don't come without caveats, without challenges. There's a darkness there as well. Another thing too is when you're born during an eclipse, it increases the chances that you are going to be historically relevant. Something about your life or what you're doing is going to interact, and really affect the world in a big way. Okay. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that every person born on an eclipse is going to be as, how do I phrase this? Like, this person clearly has dramatically changed history. Okay. For better or for worse, whatever. I'm not saying every person born on an eclipse is going to be on that level per se. But again, it's one of those things where it's no surprise that, he's clearly influential. Not only is this a full moon lunar eclipse, this is a Sagittarius full moon lunar eclipse. So we're bringing in the energies of the Gemini Sagittarius opposition. This is, in my opinion, a particularly interesting opposition. This is a yang polarity, so that would indicate this person is going to be very active, very energetic. We've established that with the Leo Mars, but also having Sagittarius Moon. Deep down, this person's going to be fiery, outgoing, warm, charismatic, persuasive. They may be very happy at times. They could also be very angry or frustrated. Like those are the kinds of emotions that you have with fire signs, if that makes sense. Again, there's a lot of like stamina with Gemini and Sagittarius, though. These are mutable signs, so that means that this person is going to be very like flexible, adaptable, very open to new ideas or different ideas. He does have Sun in Gemini, which is a little bit different. It adds kind of a different twist here. So that means that Gemini is actually very impressionable. Gemini, as you can see in one of my recent polls that I did, Gemini cares about the thoughts and opinions of others. Gemini wants to be friends with everyone. So it's very interesting. We're combining this like open, easygoing Gemini energy, but we're mixing that with these very fiery, like very outgoing, very intense energies of, Leo Moon, Leo Rising, or excuse me. Yeah, I said that right. Leo Moon, Leo Rising, and Sagittarius Moon. So I would say he's a fire dom, but again, Sun in Gemini. He also has some major Cancer placements that I guess we should talk about now. So it's a little bit of a mix. Let's see. I'm debating where to go. Let's talk about Cancer, because he does actually have a lot of Cancer placements. His four most major signs are easily, I'd say, Leo first, and then Gemini and Sagittarius, and Cancer as well. Most of the activity is going on in those four signs. So it's very interesting. Honestly, I wouldn't really expect a lot of Cancer placement. I guess that makes sense, though. Okay, so Mercury and Venus in Cancer. Saturn is there as well. Saturn conjunct Venus shows a lot of challenges or delays with romance, love, even with material wealth, maybe. And it's kind of a mix. Typically when you have a lot of fire placements, you can be very quick to accumulate wealth, but you can also be quick to lose it or to spend it. There's a lot of like high highs and low lows when you have a lot of fire in your chart, materialistically or economically. But we're mixing that with, Saturn conjunct Venus. Venus is your pleasure, your abundance, your romance, and having Saturn conjunct Venus means challenges, delays. I could imagine that whenever this aspect is triggered for him with transits, there could be major losses or a darkness with either with money or with personal relationships. He's probably gone through some maybe traumatic losses emotionally or romantically. I mean, who hasn't? You could kind of say that about anyone, but him in particular, it wouldn't surprise me if he went through like the death of a spouse or loved one, or and when I'm talking about these things, I'm not wishing that on anyone. I never would. but Saturn will bring loss. It brings darkness. It brings challenges, or maybe sickness of a partner. I feel like I shouldn't even talk about this honestly, but that is a dark. It is a challenging placement. That does indicate though that he could find like a really genuine. I don't want to say perfect, but he could find a really genuine situation romantically. But it may come later in life. It may take time for him to find that. It may take time for him to grow that. And again, we have to kind of compare and contrast different parts of the chart. His fire placements, because again, I'm going to keep going back to those because that's the main dominant kind of theme, I would say. The fire placements want things quickly. They are charismatic. They're out there. Fire signs, that's like the energy of actors kind of and actresses, celebrities. So fire signs are usually very quick to get into romantic situations. So he would still retain much of that. But at the same time, with Venus conjunct Saturn in Cancer, it's a little bit of a mix. He does want to be very flashy and outgoing, flamboyant, you could say, and be that, I don't want to say sexy guy necessarily, but being that charismatic guy or whatever it is, flashy, getting all the attention. He is that, but at the same time, romantically, I think part of him wants to settle down. He wants someone grounding. He wants someone he can feel secure with. With Venus in Cancer, this may sound weird, but Venus in Cancer is very emotional. So he's going to be a very emotional partner. He may actually be a little bit clingy. He wants a close partnership. He wants, the touchy-feely, kind of sappy stuff. He may actually be much more sappy in romantic relationships than he appears otherwise. Like, generally speaking, if you're just like a friend or coworker or something, you're not really going to see that side of him as much. You're more going to see the fiery side, fiery, outgoing, to the point, very direct. But again, romantically, there's this much softer, kind of sweeter side that it's not that it's like secretive necessarily. It's just a different side of him that would come out more in romantic relationships. That's what I would speculate based on his Venus placement. We'll talk more about that at the very last chapter of the reading, where I'll talk more about his romance, relationships, things like that. But yeah, speaking of other Cancer placements, what really drew my eye to Cancer initially was Mercury in Cancer. Most people have Mercury in the same sign as their Sun placement. So typically, Mercury and the Sun almost kind of act as a unit. They act like a system together. In this chart, that's not the case. Sun is in Gemini, Mercury is in Cancer. These are two very different energies. With Mercury in Cancer, this is interesting. I was actually just talking about this because Mercury is entering Cancer this week, the week that I'm making this video. But with Mercury entering Cancer, it's very interesting because Mercury is, of course, the mind, the mental energy, the intellect. It's how we communicate, how we think. It also has to do with reading, writing, things like that, bartering. With Mercury in Cancer, Cancer is the most emotional sign, I would say. So with Mercury in Cancer, it's kind of like you're thinking with your heart or thinking with your gut, I guess you could say. You're thinking with your feeling. It's like the feeling is truly in charge of the thinking, if that makes sense. I know that's a little contradictory. So in other words, he may make his intellectual decisions or his analytical abilities actually come from a place of emotion or instinct. So he may just kind of like, I guess you could say this is an intuitive placement. He may kind of just know things without knowing why he knows them. Like he kind of just, it's very instinctual. He can probably be analytical. He does have Sun in Gemini, Moon in Sagittarius. Those are analytical placements. But again, Mercury is the one that's showing how he thinks, and that's in Cancer, which is fundamentally emotional. So you could say there are pros and cons to every placement. I think the cons are pretty obvious. Thinking with your feeling. Feelings are transient. Feelings are constantly changing. Feelings are subjective. If you're using that as your modality when it comes to how you're thinking, and processing information, of course that can lead you to, errors. Or it can lead you to not seeing other points of view or things of that nature. But at the same time, being subjective can actually be advantageous as well. I particularly noticed that Cancer can actually be very good when it comes to business, because Cancer knows how it feels more so than any other sign, and Cancer is a cardinal sign, so Cancer leads through emotion. They lead with emotion. This is basically his 11th house, so that shows that when it comes to dealing with his tribe, his community, his colleagues, coworkers, whatever, he may actually come across a little bit emotional, which again, there's pros and cons to that. But I do find that can be advantageous because he may be excellent when it comes to leading with his emotion, pushing his emotion out, basically saying like, I feel this way about this situation, so you should too, and not saying it in words like that. Like that's what I do because I'm more of a wordy person. But for him, he would be excellent when it comes to instigating through that emotion, kind of like pushing that emotion, being very persuasive. What else? Also with Cancer comes across as innocent, whether it is or not. So having these placements in Cancer, particularly Mercury and Venus, I think that could add to him coming across, I don't want to say charming necessarily, but like persuasive, let's just say. When we're mixing these fire placements with Cancer, it comes across persuasive. He may come across, at least in his like actual immediate, I'm not talking about like news coverage and things like that, but when it comes to actually dealing with him one-on-one, he may come across innocent or again persuasive. He may be very excellent when it comes to getting other people on the same page as him, if that makes any sense at all. Another thing too is that, and I know I can just imagine the comments I'm gonna get. I know this is gonna be whatever, but you have to admit, and I've done polls to support this as well, but Gemini and Sagittarius is the polarity of humor. Okay, Gemini and Sagittarius are known more than any other signs for their humor. You could argue, Capricorn and Scorpio have their kind of deadpan, dark humor. I would say Cancer can be very humorous as well, but it's consistently voted in astrological circles that Gemini and Sagittarius are the funniest. Bill Burr, for example, I think was born during a Gemini full moon or a Sagittarius full moon as well. There are many other comedians as well. I don't know a lot of comedians off the top of my head, but so anyway, you can kind of get what I'm saying. I wouldn't be surprised if he's either like very humorous or he has like a very a sense of humor that's very like prevailing, very strong, very dominant. It's a thing basically. And this would be very visible as well because again, Gemini is like very much occupying the 10th house. So he would be seen, he'd be seen as a lot of things. He'd be seen as charismatic, persuasive, outgoing, but also humorous as well, funny for sure. What is interesting to me though is that he does have some, how do I put this? He has some placements that I've gone over already that are showing a very domineering personality, very outgoing, very active in career and public, arenas of life. But there are other placements as well which suggest something much different. South Node and the Moon are both in the 4th house. 4th house has to do with home and family. 4th house is the darkest part of any chart. It is the opposite of the top of the sky. There's a word for it, I'm forgetting. But it's basically just straight underground. You can't see anything even near the 4th house because it's not in the sky. So with Moon and South Node in the 4th house, if we were just looking at those placements alone and disregarding everything else, that would indicate someone who, when it comes to being in his comfort zone and, displaying like emotion and affection and feeling like he's in a safe place, that would really only come out at home. And I know you could argue, well, isn't everyone that way? Honestly, no. Some of us have that in relationships. Some of us have that at work. Yes, I think it is universal that home is supposed to be a safe place, but this is especially going to be true for him. For him, there's very much a huge polarity. He's very comfortable at work, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's so much going on in these public parts of the chart that I went over. So it does show he has energy there. That is his comfort zone. He can really thrive there. He gets attention in public. He handles that well, I guess you could say, or he has a prominent reputation that I can see in the chart. But again, what's interesting though is that there's this whole other side to things that I think that there may be a much different side of him at home that is maybe softer in nature, if that makes sense. It looks like it would still be very humorous because this is Sagittarius that we're talking about. But it's the moon. The moon has to do with someone's emotion, kind of the softer side of the personality. It's also very intuitive. So all of that would be much more vibrant, much more active at home or in environments that are very familiar to him. Okay. So you're not going to see as much emotion or softness or sensitivity when he's in more public spaces or in environments that he's not as familiar with. Okay. What else could we talk about? You know what? Let's actually just move ahead to the next chapter. So this is where we get really deep. We talk about past lives in this chapter. We talk about someone's karma, their challenges, their potential, as well as their upbringing a little bit as well. So for a lot of this, I look at the South Node. The South Node is such an underrated placement in astrology. And again, it's not even depicted in this chart, but North Node is at 20 degrees Gemini in the 10th house. So we know that South Node is at 20 degrees Sagittarius in the 4th house, and it's conjunct the moon. Okay, this is very interesting, and it's a little bit contradictory. So this would indicate a personality who, in a past life, the reason why I say it's contradictory is because South Node is in Sagittarius. That would indicate someone who was either a traveler. It could be a lot of things, so bear with me. Someone who is a traveler, or someone who dealt with the expansion of the mind, the expansion of the soul, either through information or like soulfulness, spirituality, religion. So that could be a lot of different things. By its very nature, it's very expansive, and it could go down many avenues. This would be a person in a past life who was a guru or like an expert, someone who had traveled very far and like maybe participated in many different like industries or business. Could be a business person, clergy member. What else? What's interesting though is that this is also in the 4th house. 4th house is almost the opposite. 4th house that would indicate someone who was home a lot or someone who was with family all the time. So I'm almost picturing like a grandfather or grandmother, someone who was they were an expert. They had experienced many things, but their role was to assist the family or assist whoever was closest to them, and that role may have actually involved them being away from the limelight a lot. It paints the picture of a very dramatically different lifestyle than what this person has today, at least what I know of this person. I'm trying to think how else I can narrow that down. South Node being conjunct the moon shows that he emotion was his life. Like in a past life, he may have either been very maternal or very paternal. He may have, what else? Or very spiritual as well. Something that required a lot of empathy and assisting others, helping, like raising other people, or something involving like being very instinctual and emotional, maybe being very family oriented. I know I'm kind of listing off multiple things. I'm trying to wrap it up in like a package for you. I think the main connection between 4th house and Sagittarius is that he knew a great deal of information, but it wasn't like facts and statistics and things like that. This was more like knowledge or wisdom. He may have been very wise in the past life. And again, he would have fit some kind of like family leader or tribal leadership type role because of his wisdom. I know that sounds really far out there, but that's what I see based on South Node conjunct the moon in 4th house Sagittarius. In a past life, he was much more focused on a much more private role, familial role than what we see today. So what's interesting about being born on a full moon lunar eclipse is that the sun is conjunct the North Node. Typically, I would describe the North Node as, that's the area that you're moving toward. It's outside of your comfort zone, but it's what your soul's kind of intending on learning in this life. It's the direction that you're going. So that is still true in many ways. So in other words, like with South Node and Sagittarius, that would paint the picture of someone in a past life. He may have been very stubborn with what he knew. Like he felt like he knew about the world. He had so much experience. So he was almost like taking the role of like a priest or something, someone who was, the information was always going outward because he was the knowledgeable one, he was the experienced one, etc. With North Node and Gemini, he's learning in this life to listen and go with the flow a little bit more, like read the room rather than just saying, I'm the knowledgeable one, listen to me. Maybe it can be more of a back and forth, okay? So that's something that he may struggle with in this lifetime. However, with Sun conjunct the North Node, this is the point I'm trying to make here. The Sun, whenever you have Sun conjunct the North Node, it's kind of a free pass. It means that in many areas, in many ways, you're already kind of comfortable with what would otherwise be that points astrologically for you to grow to. Does that make sense? So like, see, he would still be learning in this lifetime to be basically more like Gemini, be more adaptable, go with the flow. Yes, you would still maybe speak a lot, but also listen. It's an exchange, right? Rather than you being the knowledgeable one, meet people halfway. Maybe you can learn something too. So yes, he would still be learning that, but at the same time, he has a huge advantage, especially early in life. Like he kind of has like a running start, you could say. Because with Sun in Gemini, it means that this is his comfort zone. He already knows this to some extent. Is this dramatically different than his past life? Yes, but it's not going to be totally foreign to him either, if that makes sense. A different way of putting it is whenever someone has Sun or Moon conjunct the North Node, and this may sound crazy as well, but they just come across well-rounded. They don't really have to necessarily work for this particular skill or asset. They just kind of already have it. So that's how his Gemini side, and Gemini can be a very immature sign. It can be very directionless and impressionable. It can be too adaptable. But when it comes to those Gemini assets or skills, those would be well developed from a young age, which again is very interesting because it's something that wasn't there in a past life. In a past life, he had the charisma and the coming across like, oh, I'm so knowledgeable, I know what I'm talking about, you should listen to me. That was there. We're seeing that from a past life. That was very much there from perhaps multiple other lifetimes. But this other side, which is more, again, impressionable, go with the flow, open to others, open-minded, this is new. It's something that it was well developed at a young age, but it's new in the sense that this is something really prominent in this particular lifetime that wasn't there in other lifetimes. I know that was a weird journey. I hope you stayed with me for that. Okay, we talked about past lives. We talked a little bit about, potential and growth and things like that. Another area we could talk about some of these things is Saturn. We did talk about Saturn a little bit, but with Saturn in 11th house Cancer, Saturn in Cancer is a very difficult placement. Saturn in any sign is very difficult, but especially Saturn in Cancer. The reason why is because Saturn is in detriment in Cancer, So, why is this difficult? The reason why it's difficult is because Cancer, again, it's the most emotional sign. Wherever it is in your chart, it has to do with this very emotional part of your life. So for him, it's interesting. 11th house is on Cancer. So that means he's very emotional, or very personal when it comes to his relations to his community, to his coworkers, and I'm not saying that can be for better or for worse. Obviously there's huge advantages of that. But it could be subjective and irrational as well. He could be irrational in how he deals with his community. But at the same time, it's personal, it's subjective, there's feeling there. Okay. So that's what Cancer means for him. The challenging thing is that with Saturn and Cancer, okay, wherever Saturn is in your chart, it's something that you have to work for it. You don't have it right away. So, for example, we talked about Saturn conjunct Venus. Venus has to do with your material wealth, your romantic situations. Those, you could argue, I'm trying to forget everything I know about this person so that I don't have to, constantly defend myself. You could argue that, I know he comes from a wealthy family, whatever. But if I was just going off the chart, Saturn conjunct Venus to me would indicate someone who has to work for their pleasure or work, they've had to work for their, especially romantically, they've had to learn a lot, or there has had to be a lot of time before he finds that ideal situation romantically or even materialistically. So that's one example of how Saturn operates. With Saturn in Cancer as well, um, starting out in life, he may have felt like he didn't have a family. And I don't necessarily mean that literally. I'm just saying Cancer. So, okay, when it comes to a home or a family, ideally, home and family represent parts of our lives where we can let our guard down. We're safe, we're comfortable. We can kind of like just let it all out, let it hang loose, so to speak. That's what Cancer kind of represents. With Saturn in Cancer, though, this person wouldn't have that. They would start out life feeling like they don't have a home, like they have to have their guard up all the time. What else? So basically, like, it would be this person's duty. Like, yes, there is a challenge there, but the opportunity is that with time, you will learn how to create your own sense of family. You'll learn how to create your own tribe, your own community as well. So it's not just like an immediate family unit, although that's part of it. Because it's in the 11th house, this applies to like his whole, he could create like an entire workplace or empire, tribe, community, etc. He'd start out life not really having that, not having a sense of community, not having a sense of family. It's his job to create that for himself, and that would take time. That may take into someone's 20s, 30s, or beyond. But ideally, and this part depends on free will, but ideally what starts out dark or empty with Saturn can be, you can make this a strength with time. So he has the potential of, by creating his own sense of family and tribalism or community, he can be a leader. He can create something of his own. It's just a painful process because, ideally, like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, creating, this world of your own, family of your own. The reason why it's so dark, though, is because, that comes from a place of not having that. Only by not having something can you truly value the purpose of it, if that makes sense. So that's how he would be with family and community, because that's how Saturn works. I hope I explained that well enough. Okay, so we talked about challenges. Something I'm noticing as I get deeper into his chart is that he may be very subjective. I think that would be probably his biggest strength as well as his biggest challenge, is seeing things from his point of view. And again, there's huge advantages of that. When you only see things from your point of view, that allows you to speak with much more conviction. Things are simpler in your mentality, so you can be much more persuasive. You can be much more decisive. It makes for a better leader. The downside of that, though, is that although he does have Sun in Gemini, I do think he would on some level be open-minded. But at the same time, it may be hard for him to truly grasp like other perspectives or things outside of his vicinity or realm, if that makes sense. So that's just something I'm noticing. And I could cite many different placements kind of going into that. There's the Leo rising, Mars conjunct the rising, all the Cancer placements, and also Moon and Sagittarius conjunct the South Node. All of those indicate, like, I feel this way. This is my experience, so that's what I'm going with. And again, that's extremely powerful, but also potentially limiting as well. I know in my heart of hearts what's right. I know what's right. I know what I need to do. I know what other people need to do. You can kind of see. I think I hit something big there. You can see that's what's motivating this person. That's what will give him a lot of motivation. He's going to be someone decisive. He's going to be someone who, when everyone else is kind of sitting around like weighing all the options and weighing the pros and cons, he's not doing that. He already knows what to do, if that makes sense. And really, it's actually interesting. As I'm saying this, I'm speaking from first person, but it's actually very different than my chart. I'm much more indecisive. Most Geminis are as well. But his chart, for being a Gemini, there's a lot more going on in these fire signs and in Cancer. Let's talk about his upbringing a little bit. So for the upbringing, I mostly look to South Node and the IC. Both of these placements give you kind of an idea of what a person was like in their youth. And remember, South Node also has to do with past lives, so it's not a coincidence that that same placement has to do with what someone was like as a child. So with South Node in Sagittarius, conjunct the moon, I would speculate that as a child he was very, very stubborn because it kind of goes with what I was just saying. As a young person, he was very confident. He knew how he felt. And that may have been difficult because he may have not been emotionally stable. He may have been like very excited, very outgoing. Okay, I've got this awesome new idea. Let's do this. And, so much enthusiasm and optimism and charisma. But I could see that leading to a roller coaster mentality, though. It would take him time to stabilize, I think. At a young age, he would be, like pretty much what I was just talking about, but like to the power of 10 or something, like squared, on another dimension. Like, he was so much leading with emotion, leading with the heart energy, or, coming up with these big ideas and just like going off of that excitement and enthusiasm that there was no stability. He may have had really good ideas that really worked super well, and then that would build him up even more. But inevitably certain ideas would come crashing down, certain projects wouldn't work out, But through this kind of trial and error, I do think trial and error. I do think that would lead to stability, but it would take time. It would take decades. Okay. I noticed this with mutable signs in general, because of their openness, and they do this, they do that, they try this out. Those experiences, those are valuable. But it takes time to mature when you have that level of openness and when you have that level of, like it's such strong moon energy here. Really, this is actually kind of strengthened by IC, which is in Scorpio, IC, and South Node conjunct the moon in Sagittarius. These are both very passionate placements, very emotional placements. They're both kind of fiery as well. So again, as at a young age, very passionate, very emotional, very invested in whatever he was doing. Like, he would put a lot of ego and pride in his projects, and so I could see him, any young person, you're trying things out, you don't know exactly what's going to work or not, you're learning. I could see him just having such high highs and low lows. Like, he'd feel like the king of the world when his plans are going right, but then for the things that would fail or not work out as he intended, like, he would feel so low. And but it would only be a matter of time before he'd pick himself up and then be optimistic and excited about some other new idea. Okay, that's the nature of Sagittarius. To some extent, Scorpio's like that too, just in a kind of heavier way. But both of these, very intense, and he'd really want to go all the way, so to speak. That's another commonality between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So at a young age, he'd want to come up with like the biggest idea. Like, what's the best thing we could do? What's something that no one else has done before? What's something that is going to be, I don't know, the biggest, the best, the fastest, whatever, the cheapest or the most expensive. It's very extreme in nature. So that's kind of what his process would be. Very extreme emotions, very extreme ideas. And again, everything I'm saying, you can look at that as a strength as well as, a challenge or a weakness, I guess. But yeah, so very, very extreme, very intense in his youth. That's what I would speculate. Very charismatic for sure, but also intense. And that would be even more true like the younger you go as well. And we can see how parts of that are still there for sure. But like with many people, I think he'd mellow out a little bit as you get older. He would still have a lot of fire, spontaneity, energy. But I think that intensity would mellow out just a tiny bit. Like the emotional intensity of the IC in Scorpio, I think would mellow out just a hair. Okay, we talked about karma, challenges, potential, upbringing. Saturn is direct, and it's actually in a very prominent part of the chart. Sun is in a very prominent part of the chart as well, so that would indicate a very present father in his upbringing. Father was Very present, very active in his life, very much involved in his upbringing. Um, the mother, it's harder for me to see. Moon in fourth house is kind of you could read it in different ways. I mean, the fourth house, whatever's in the 10th house is like bearing down on you. It's very present. So very present father, that's absolutely certain. But the fourth house is the opposite of that. Whatever's in the fourth house was off shining on some other part of the world, is one way I've heard it put. So moon representing the mother being in the fourth house, that could indicate an absent mother. On the other hand, though, the fourth house does form a strong aspect to the ascendant. And fourth house does have to do with home and family. So depending on how you read it, I could see a very present mother. I could also see her being completely absent, though. Maybe present in some ways or at some times, but then very absent at other times. Not nearly as present and involved as the father, which is kind of interesting. Honestly, I think that's the minority. There's a lot of placements that can indicate an absent father, but I really don't see any for him. All right, let's talk about romantically. Let's talk about what kind of person does this person this chart, what does this chart need romantically? How do I see the ideal relationship playing out for them, etc. We'll talk about all that. I'll say this, I've probably said this thousands of times. Much of what we're talking about, it depends on Venus, Mars, and the descendant. You can't just look at someone's sun and moon sign and talk about their romantic compatibility. I don't think so. It's going to dramatically change depending on their Venus, Mars, and their descendant. So that's mostly what I'm going to talk about here. Do the sun and moon and Mercury matter for compatibility? Sure, of course they do. But I really look at Venus, Mars, and the descendant. Okay, so he's got kind of a blend of completely different energies when it comes to these three different placements. Venus is in Cancer, Mars is in Leo, and the descendant is in Aquarius. So let's talk about Mars first. Mars, I think, is the least important of the three, but I do mention it because it has to do with attraction. Both Venus and Mars have to do with, what kind of person is this person attracted to, and also how do they express their attraction as well. Mars in particular is very sexual in nature, and Mars in Leo is very sexual. Depending on your Mars placement, you can see somebody's sex drive. Mars in Leo is going to be a very high sex drive. It is in the 12th house, so again, it may have always been there for him, but it may have been suppressed at a young age. The sex drive and also being attracted to someone like Leo. To turn this person on, he's gonna need someone like Leo. He's gonna need someone confident, outgoing. Very very confident, very sure of themselves. Someone who has a lot of fire, a lot of energy to them, a lot of optimism. What else? Someone who's a leader, someone who's outgoing, someone who's a little bit strong-willed and stubborn. Like, he might not mind someone who he can butt heads with a little bit. Him being Leo rising, he's stubborn, okay? He's not really gonna compromise a whole lot in a relationship, but he may actually respect someone else who is that way as well. Someone else who's a little bit stubborn, strong-willed, fiery, outgoing, eccentric, etc. So Leo or other fire signs could be very attractive to him. I think this is especially true because of his moon and south node in Sagittarius and his Leo rising. So we can definitely put fire signs on the map, so to speak. Fire signs he's going to relate to on a deep level. It could be a part of a deep friendship, a deep connection. But also, again, with Mars in Leo, that could be that deep connection could be something more, could be romantic as well. I always mention, though, that Mars is a double-edged sword. So Mars can indicate really great chemistry, really great sexuality with in this case with Leo, or Leo personalities that are reminiscent of Leo, the fire signs, for example. That can be very exciting, very, very fun, and very sexy because of Mars and Leo. But Mars can also have to do with aggression and irritability. Okay, so Leo in particular, I could see him being very attracted to, but it's going to be a very competitive type of dynamic. Leo rising, I've noticed that couples often will have the same ascendant sign, so it wouldn't surprise me if he would match up with Leo rising. They would both kind of lead their lives in a similar fashion, even if this other person, if this like imaginary partner even if the rest of their chart is dramatically different, they would still be strong-willed. They'd be a leader. They'd both be very confident, charismatic. So Leo rising, I could see being a very compatible placement. Or like I said, other fire signs in general. Aries, I might shy away from because Aries is gonna square his Venus. We're going to talk about his Venus. Venus in Cancer is very sentimental. Okay, so like I mentioned before, it's a blend. He needs someone who's kind of a blend of different things. He does need someone who's outgoing, ambitious, confident, like Leo. But even more importantly than that, with Venus in Cancer, he needs someone who can be soft and tender as well. Someone nurturing, someone maybe emotional, maybe someone who's more emotional than he is. And it looks like he can be very emotional. Maybe someone intuitive as well, emotionally intelligent. That's going to be probably more attractive to him than anything else, even more attractive than confidence. Confidence and being strong-willed, that's very attractive for him, but again, that nurturing energy and that emotion is even more attractive for him. Someone who's truly confident emotionally. So anyway, that was kind of a tangent, but I was talking about how Aries is going to kind of clash with all that. Aries may rub him the wrong way romantically. Aries could be a great friend or maybe business partner or something like that. He may appreciate and relate to Aries' energy, enthusiasm. That could even be kind of sexy for him. But again, he needs someone that's kind of soft and tender, and of course, Aries will be different depending on what placements are there and what the other placements are. But Aries in general as a sign is going to be a little bit too brash or may actually come across too strong or individualistic for him. So far Leo and Sagittarius definitely stand out to me for sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about his Venus in Cancer. So Venus in Cancer in some ways is a very strong placement, and other ways it can definitely have its challenges. Because, well, okay, so Venus is how we express ourselves romantically, right? It goes both ways. It also has to do with what kind of person we are attracted to. And with Venus in Cancer, we want that nurturing person. We want to be nurturing as well. Sometimes we may be the nurturer, sometimes we may be the nurtured. Like, we may be more on one side of that than the other, but somewhere in there's a lot of nurturing and a lot of emotion and that kind of sappy energy, being very touchy-feely, etc. The reason why this can be troublesome is because with Venus in Cancer, I often see a lot of codependency. Like, this person may get involved in like a codependent relationship. They may be the codependent one, the other person may be the codependent one. But it can be manipulative, which is really unfortunate. But that is more kind of the darker side of this. Because Venus in Cancer, like, that person could be taken advantage of for their nurturing energy, or it could be the other way around. This person might be the one taking advantage of someone else who's nurturing in a relationship. I'm not trying to say which way that would go, and that's not always the case, but it's the darker side of Venus in Cancer, in my opinion. That's what I've seen. But yeah, so ideally this person's going to be attracted to someone emotional, creative, intelligent, someone who knows how they feel. That's going to be so attractive for him. And again, when he expresses himself romantically, I talked about this earlier, it's going to unlock a very like emotional, sensitive side of him, something that's a little bit different than how he's normally seen. Not that he's not seen as emotional per se, but this is a very like soft, kind of sweet side. It's a little different. So that is going to match up with other water signs. Cancer for sure he would relate to, and Cancer is going to embody that more than anything else. Cancer can be very nurturing. Cancer loves being very touchy-feely and cuddly and things like that. So that's going to very much satisfy him romantically, and that will someone with that energy will be receptive to the way he expresses himself romantically as well. Other water signs could do the trick too. Maybe I really hesitate to say Pisces because, okay, yes, Pisces does have some of what he's looking for. His compatibility is complicated because his Venus, Mars, and Descendant are in different elements. Pisces does have that touchy-feely, cuddly, emotional intelligence, like Cancer does. The difference though is that Pisces has no shape. Pisces is so adaptable. It's over here, it's over there. It's kind of hippie energy. I really don't think he'd be attracted to that at all. He wants someone more strong-willed. He wants a leader. Cancer can be that for sure. We talked about the fire signs, Leo, Sagittarius. Those can be leaders. Those can be strong and confident. Even Cancer can, Cancer can be kind of subtle or introverted, but at the same time, this is cardinal water. It's someone who leads with emotion. It's very different. That Pisces is kind of just all over the place. It's kind of directionlessness. It lacks direction. In some ways, he kind of lacks direction too. So he doesn't need someone else who's like that too. I mean, it just, in my opinion, it really doesn't make sense at all. The only thing going for Pisces is that touchy-feely emotion that is attractive to him, but everything else that he kind of needs isn't really there. Scorpio could be interesting, but even Scorpio, I'm not really in love with for him. The reason why is because I always caution against Scorpio-Leo connections more than any other. I'm not saying it can't work. It absolutely could work. It often does work for some time. The trouble with Scorpio and Leo, and the reason why I'm saying this is because he does have Ascendant and Mars in Leo. Those are major placements for compatibility. If he matches up with Scorpio, sure, they have some things in common. They're both going to be ambitious, fiery, intense. Scorpio also has that kind of touchy-feely, emotional component that he's looking for. The challenge is that Scorpio needs loyalty. I'm not saying he's not loyal per se, but Scorpio needs to know, like, Scorpio is so emotionally intense that it needs to know that it can count on a person. So Scorpio, in my opinion, although they do like complexity, they also like a little bit of, someone who's a little bit predictable, or someone who has a kind of a routine. That's what's going to give Scorpio security. So for someone whose chart looks like this, he's all over the place. He's doing this one day, he's doing that the next day. He's going over here. He's probably traveling a lot, because there's that huge Sagittarius focus. With his Leo placements, he does want loyalty for sure. I mean, with the Cancer Venus and the Leo placements, he can be loyal. It looks like he wants to be a family man. He wants to be a family, to have a family, be family oriented. Scorpio would probably like that. It would like that loyalty and commitment. But the difference is he's going to be the life of the party. He's going to be out, very active and stuff. And that may be threatening for Scorpio. And that's where things could get very possessive, because his Leo and even Cancer can be possessive as well. So with the Scorpio, he runs the risk of, it would be very passionate, very sexual, very intense, but it would be very volatile, high highs, low lows, both kind of hitting each other's insecurities. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I really urge anyone to proceed with caution when mixing one person with major Leo placements and the other one with major Scorpio placements. They seem like they have a lot in common at first, and they do, but those commonalities can lead to difficulties because of their differences, if that makes sense. Neither one will want to let go, but it can, I don't know. So it's kind of weird. He's attracted to a water sign, but because of the way that the rest of his chart is situated, Cancer is the only one that I'm really kind of in love with for him. I guess that's how I phrase it sometimes. But let's look elsewhere to the descendant for more information on his compatibility, because this adds another layer. I know I'm sure there's hardly anyone even watching this. But yeah, let's get into this compatibility even further. So, all right, I always do this little speech. Leo rising, Aquarius descendant. Rising is it's what he's all about. This is, rising is all about you, especially with Leo rising. It's all about me, my identity, what I'm about. It's what this person is bringing to the relationship. The descendant is the opposite of that. It's going to be the opposite side of the magnet, if that makes sense. It's going to be what this person attracts. It's going to be the partner that this person most naturally works with. It's going to be a very complementary energy. With this situation in particular, Leo rising, like I mentioned earlier, is a leader. This person leads in a very engaged way. They're very engaging, very charismatic, fiery, confident, yada yada. So with descendant in Aquarius, they're also going to be attracted to a leader. But what I always say is Aquarius is a leader, but in the opposite way of Leo. Aquarius is a leader by example. Aquarius, excuse me, I was talking too fast. Aquarius leads by example. Aquarius does its own thing. So both Leo and I'm kind of calling him Leo in this sense because he has Leo rising, and that's what we're talking about. But he's strong-willed. He's stubborn. He wants a partner who is also stubborn, but someone who's a little bit more cool, calm, and detached. Someone like Aquarius. Someone very independent. Someone who isn't really fazed by anything. So I know I'm being a little bit contradictory. Venus in Cancer suggests being with a partner who's more emotional than him. Descendant in Aquarius suggests being attracted to someone who's a little bit more aloof, someone less emotional. So it's kind of a mixed bag. What else? Descendant in Aquarius means that he may be attracted to someone very intellectual, someone who has really thought out opinions, or maybe someone who has controversial opinions, or being attracted to someone who's very, different than everyone else, very individualistic. Again, the commonality is that, he wants someone else who's strong-willed. He wants a leader, but he wants someone who, they're going to butt heads. They're both leaders. They both are very stubborn. But that's, I say this in many of my readings. I don't think you have to agree with someone all the time to have great compatibility. You just have to understand and respect each other. So for him, people with Aquarius placements or just Aquarius-like traits are going to check those boxes for him. So someone intellectual, someone who's a leader, someone who leads by example. So yeah, that could definitely, to put it in astrological terms, Aquarius is going to be a major sign of attraction for him. Again, it doesn't really work with the other air signs though, because Aquarius is a little different than the other air signs. Aquarius is fixed air, so it does have that little bit of rigidity or solidness, so to speak. That's a little bit different from Gemini and Libra. Are all over the place. They're very fickle. They're they are very adaptable. They can see all sides of the equation. That's just not what I see him wanting though. He wants someone who they know how they feel and they are a leader. They're sticking with, what you see is what you get. They're sticking with what they know. That kind of fickleness or complexity of Gemini and Libra, I just don't think is going to be attractive for him at all. And honestly, I don't think it's what he needs. It's almost reminiscent of Pisces. Pisces, Gemini, Libra, these are the most adaptable signs. They're the most flexible. He has Sun in Gemini. He has Moon in Sagittarius. He's already flexible. He's maybe too adaptable. He's too all over the place. He doesn't need that in another person. He needs someone else who's strong-willed and stubborn and consistent. Okay? So honestly, I'm really not interested in Gemini or Libra. I could see them being great friends for him. He may enjoy how Libra can be a great listener, so Libra can be like a great partner in crime with him. Gemini, he may relate with a lot. They could have like witty banter and things like that. I just don't see a strong romantic attraction there for either of those signs. So far we've got Sagittarius, Leo, Cancer, and Aquarius being major signs of attraction for him. But last thing I'm going to talk about is one element that we haven't actually mentioned yet. I don't think I've hardly mentioned this in this reading at all. The earth element. I didn't mention... Well, okay, I'll talk about that in a minute. And what's very interesting is I happen to know Melania's astrology vaguely, and I know that she is an earth dom. She has a lot of, I think, Taurus and Capricorn, or maybe it's just Taurus. It's been years since I looked at her chart. But anyway, let's just push that aside. So let's talk about the earth signs. That is very interesting. He has basically no earth placements. He does have Taurus midheaven. I think I totally skipped the career part of the reading. I'll talk about that briefly at the end of the reading here. But yeah, he has basically no earth placements. There's no earth planets at all. Compatibility with an element that you lack can be very interesting. So for him, he has everything else. He's got air, water, fire, especially fire. So he can be very persuasive, outgoing, charismatic. He can be emotional and intuitive. He can even be intellectual and analytical. He's got all of that down. What he's lacking is earth. So he may not be stable. He's doing this, he's doing that. He's very dramatic, but he's lacking that, the heaviest element to bring everything down to, like, okay, well, what are we talking about though? Like, earth sign is very the earth elements are kind of limiting in a way, but that can actually be very powerful. Earth signs are practical. They're down to earth. I think that's a strength and a weakness for him, that because he lacks earth, he can just get fully carried away in the energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm, the ideas, the emotion. Like, he gets completely just blown away and lost in all of that. He's lacking that earth energy to, like, pull him back to earth, so to speak. So when it comes to compatibility, earth signs may be very attractive for him because they have something that he lacks. Earth signs, a relationship with someone who has a lot of earth in their chart may be difficult because that person is going to be dramatically different than he is. But again, if the differences can be kind of worked out between them and there can be mutual understanding, this can be very powerful because it's mutually beneficial. It's mutually, complementary. The earth sign person will help kind of bring him back to his feet. And he has, the other parts of the equation. He has the excitement, exuberance, emotion, ideas, etc., to complement the earth person. Let's really briefly go through the earth signs, and then I'll talk about career for like 2 seconds, and then we'll wrap this up. So Virgo, I'm not in love with Virgo. I'm just going to start off right there because, again, Virgo is almost a little bit reminiscent of Gemini, Libra, Pisces because it's mutable. I know Libra's not mutable, but all these signs are flexible, adaptable. Virgo, I know everyone views Virgo as like very rigid and consistent and routine oriented. Yes, that is true to some extent, but Virgo is actually very adaptable. Virgo, nothing is really set in stone with Virgo. Virgo doesn't like to change things dramatically. But anyway, my point is, I think Virgo is a little too flimsy for him. He wants someone more, like I said, more stubborn. What you see is what you get. Someone who's more of a leader. Virgo is not those things. I love Virgo, don't get me wrong, I am a Virgo. It's just not this like dramatic leader sign that I picture for him. Taurus and Capricorn I think make more sense because Taurus and Capricorn, in a weird way, they actually do have a little bit of a mix of some things that he's looking for. They're both sentimental. That's another thing. Virgo's more analytical and detached. I don't think that's I don't know, it's just with Taurus and Capricorn, they're very practical and very stubborn, which I think could be attractive for him and very complementary. But Taurus and Capricorn are also sentimental. They're instinctual, which I think will also be attractive for him. They can do the, like, it's almost like a weird, what do you call, okay, now I'm getting lost. What do you call it when, like, two countries that are at war, when they want to negotiate peace, they do so in like neutral territory? That's what I'm imagining. Like his Cancer Venus and his descendant in Aquarius, in a weird way, the closest thing you can get to satisfying both of those, because they're so dramatically different, would be with an earth sign, specifically Taurus and Capricorn. Taurus and Capricorn have the emotional substance of Cancer, or something vaguely reminiscent of it, but then they've also got the practicality and stubbornness and consistency of Aquarius. So it's the closest thing you can get to satisfying both, the emotion of Cancer Venus with the detachment of Aquarius descendant. Does that make sense? So in a weird way, yes, I am biased because I know that his wife has these energies, but I can see how it makes sense. Taurus and Capricorn are going to be, it's really what his chart needs, and it fits with him. He could still, I think Taurus and Capricorn, because they're so straightforward and so kind of predictable, honestly, like, he will enjoy that kind of simplicity and that straightforwardness, and they'll be able to understand each other both ways. But at the same time, they are very different, so they can both bring something dramatically different to the table. So I know that was a little bit all over the place. That was very scattered, but yeah, I could see Leo, Cancer, Sagittarius. Leo and Sagittarius are going to be very attractive to him, but Taurus and Capricorn are going to be like on a different level, because they may actually be intimidating for him, Taurus and Capricorn, because again, Taurus and Capricorn are playing a different game that he doesn't really play. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know that heavy sensual stability of the earth signs. He kind of lacks that. So not only would that be exciting for him and attractive, it would also be like healthy and mutually beneficial. Okay, I know I skipped over the career part of this reading. All I'm gonna say is he has Taurus midheaven, so that would indicate that he comes across more stable and practical than he is. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's how I would read Taurus midheaven. He has all these other things in his chart, which indicates someone who's kind of a wild person. He's over there, very excited, as I mentioned. But that Taurus midheaven adds that like consistency specifically to his career and reputation. And I think that's a godsend, honestly. If it wasn't for that Taurus midheaven, I don't know if he could commit to a long career. You know what I mean? But he has that combination of Leo Mars, Leo rising, Taurus midheaven, adding just enough consistency that he can have like a large, long-term career. But yeah, a lot of wild energy in this chart. This was particularly challenging. Honestly, charts that I know, if when I know the person or I know of them, actually makes it harder for me to be objective. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this reading. Again, if you want a reading of your own, definitely go to the description and hit me up, email me, go to my website, etc. But thanks so much for hanging out with me for this hour and 10 minutes, and I'll see you later.